Sports Interactive's long-running football management simulator is back. According to the developers, this year's iteration is the most complete version to date, which is music to my ears because, well, FM23 and I didn't have the best of times. My initial impressions of FM24 are, or were, promising. There have been some decent strides forward, especially in the match engine department. Essential pillars of the game, such as scouting, transfers and player development, are as fun and in-depth as they have ever been. Bringing a youth player through the ranks to be a star in your first team will always be satisfying, and the inclusion of intermediary agents is especially welcome, but as in previous years, attention to detail is lacking in other areas. Before I continue though, let me just say that this is going to be a mixed but honest review. I consider myself to be a long-standing FM veteran, and I have played the game for many years, all the way back to the good old days of Championship Manager. I only mention this because the franchise over the years has amassed a large fanbase, and it continues to grow each year, which is great, but it can sometimes be very militant and protective of the game. With that in mind, any criticisms expressed during this video are my honest opinions. Some of you will agree, others disagree, but we should all remember that we are all friends and fans of this franchise. It's always good to start with a positive, so let's do just that. This year's match engine has definitely improved. There has been an overhaul to ball physics, which is evident to see from the first whistle. When a shot is blocked or charged down, the ball now travels at a more realistic speed and trajectory. Deflected shots can sometimes result in goals, just like in real life, and it's certainly a step in the right direction. I am looking forward to seeing how they can improve this further when they switch to the Unity engine for FM25. Attacking and defensive phases of the match engine have seen some decent improvements too, with clever through balls and player runs. Now, although to be fair, this isn't necessarily anything new, the player animations have received some much needed refinement. Players pass, shoot, jump, tackle and move more like real world footballers, which makes watching the games in the 3D engine easier on the eye. As far as tactics in general are concerned, I think the way they are implemented in this year's game is actually pretty solid. Most team and player instructions seem more effective in this year's game, at least when compared to FM23. FM24 is easily the best when it comes to tactical freedom and control. A new player role, the inverted fullback, has been included, and existing roles such as the libero have been improved, so those amongst us that wish to emulate Pep Guardiola can now do so. If a player is capable of performing in a role and has the attributes to do so, then more often than not, you'll see them carrying out your orders. That being said, it still lacks polish in certain situations. For example, the probability of wingers or wide players still going for goal, regardless of how tight the angles are, is still quite high. The intelligent play would be to square the ball to a more central player for a tap-in. In these situations, I'd like to see player intelligence override the individual and team tactics. Now, to be clear, this doesn't happen all the time, but I did lose count on how many potential goal-scoring opportunities went begging because of greedy wingers fantasising over tomorrow's back pages. Furthermore, floated crosses are in general ineffectual, at least in my experience. This could be a tactical issue, but I've definitely had more joy with low or whipped crosses. When a ball is floated into the box, attackers they just seem to struggle with heading the ball with any real venom, resulting in a soft header towards goal or just off target. Again, the intelligent play here would be for the attacker to head the ball down towards a teammate or to flick it on for on-rushing attacking midfielders. I am willing to give the game the benefit of the doubt, however, in these situations, seeing as there are options available to the manager to reduce the likelihood of wide players going for goal, and you can also train them to look for the pass instead of the shot, as well as tweaking how crosses are delivered in your team tactics menu. This gripe is more of an observation and a personal critique rather than a criticism of the game. Maybe I just need to get good. Additional match engine improvements include a new lighting system and pitch textures, although I have to admit I can't really see much of a difference, but let's be honest here, the graphics of Football Manager have never been the USP for the franchise. I'm sure the improvements are there, but the game has never been something that can put a GPU through its paces, so any changes are subtle at best. Again, this is something I expect to take a large stride forward when the Unity engine comes into play next year. One thing I have noticed, however, is an occasional orange hue or tint on the screen. This is usually at the beginning of each match, and it quickly reverts back to a more natural colour when the team sheets appear. It's also present when selecting in-game highlights from the fixture menu. Now, it's nothing major and it doesn't detract from the overall experience, but it is worth mentioning all the same. Another new but sadly disappointing feature in this year's game is the set piece creator, and honestly, ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty crap. There's now extra UI, menus and buttons to wade through, all of which feel unnecessary and make the screen graphics look excessive and busy. The whole system just feels clunky. There are now sub-menus for each specific roles, such as aerial and box threats, recovery defenders and creators. Each sub-menu can be opened up and players can be moved up and down within each list in order of priority and effectiveness, similar to how the squad planner works. So for example, if you have a player that is first in aerial threats, they will be assigned to an aerial threat role. Now that sounds simple enough. So let's say from a corner set piece, your centre backs are set to attack the far and near posts. And then let's say your striker is also set to mark the keeper. Now let's, for example, say they are first, second and third of the list in aerial threats. Now using the drop down menus, you can assign each player a role, just like in previous versions, attack near post, lurk at far post, etc, etc. However, if those same players are high on another list, recovery defenders for example, then you will need to make sure that aerial threats is prioritised in another list above recovery defenders. Otherwise your centre backs will be told to just stay back and defend, and other less effective players will assume the role of attacking the posts, for example, which, it's like a backwards way of doing set pieces. I've actually had in attacking situations, in defensive situations, I've actually had right backs and left backs standing on the halfway line in case of a counter-attack, which just didn't make sense to me. And it's all because of where they were situated and prioritised within these lists. And now, in my opinion, it is just an overcomplicated and pointless system. The old way of being able to drag, drop and swap players seamlessly on one screen was a much better way of assigning roles and positions. Now this may be wishful thinking, but I do hope that one day in the future, SI will patch the old way of doing set pieces back into the game for quality of life improvements, if nothing else. Now you can of course just ask your assistant to sort out each of these lists to make sure that the most dangerous players are on top of each. But if, like me, and you're hands-on, then you might naturally want to just oversee everything yourself, which is why having a simpler and easier UI is essential. I've actually seen a lot of praise from popular influencers this year for the set piece overhauls, but I'm sorry, it's very much a case of Emperor's New Clothes in my opinion, and I'm just not a fan. Now, if you really don't want the headache, this year's FM has included a new set piece coach, whom is about as much use as a chocolate fireguard. I quickly took over the responsibility after trialling it myself, as it seems the AI is incapable of learning from mistakes and it never seems to make any real-time adjustments, resulting in conceded goals from the same set plays again and again and again. At the beginning of my Manchester City save, I would concede from corners pretty much all the time because my set-piece coach never assigned anybody to the edge of the box, resulting in short corners being laid off to the 18-yard line, and then an attacking midfielder or somebody on the opposition team attacking from deep would just then rifle the ball into the top corner. After I assumed control, however, I was able to put a stop to it by simply asking one player to sit on the edge of the box when defending. It literally stopped the problem overnight. Moving swiftly on to player interactions. Now, this was an area of the game that desperately needed some care and attention, but unfortunately conversations between player and manager are still wooden, robotic, and in some cases utterly broken and nonsensical. I find it hard to believe that all of a squad's team leaders would kick the hinges off a manager's door to demand that an unproven youth player be given first team football, then leave angry and dismayed when their unreasonable requests are rejected, resulting in poor team dynamics, lacklustre performances and increased manager blood pressure. Now, the promo material released by Sports Interactive prior to launch suggested an improvement to these interactions with a change to how the logic within these conversations work. Well, nearly 50 hours in, and I'm yet to experience these improvements. Players are still sensitive little babies that absolutely cannot take constructive criticism on board. I've had to deal with a potential squad mutiny because they felt the team lacked depth, despite being oversubscribed in that area of the pitch. I've even had players fall out with me because I've had the audacity to praise their recent form. It's moments like this that really break the immersion, and like I said at the beginning of the video, attention to detail is severely lacking. Now, allegedly, there are over 2,000 new AI responses in this year's release, but everything I've came across so far has just been copied and pasted from FM23, 22, 21, 20, etc, etc, etc. The same could be said for media interaction. It is still a chore. I let my assistant handle most of that nonsense, but on the odd occasion I decide to attend a press conference, I quickly realise why I avoid them altogether. The same repeated mind-numbing questions week in and week out has me climbing the walls, so props there to Sports Interactive for realism. I especially like the inevitable question about a player performing in a new role or position, even though they've been playing in that position all season. Or the long-time classic of being asked why my team has found it so hard in front of goal recently, right after putting 3 past the opposition. There's absolutely zero logic. Now, before I finish up with this extremely positive review, I'm sure you'll all agree, I just want to talk about a few little bugbears I've still got with the game. Now, nothing major, nothing doom or gloom or game breaking, just a few annoyances that further showcase the lack of attention in certain areas of the game. You can see a running theme here. The firstly being contract demands, which I think, again, are out of control and not a true reflection on real life, especially for high potential youth players. I've actually had 15 and 16 year olds straight from the academy demanding £25,000 to £30,000 a week. I mean, come on, Sports Interactive, let's be real here. In the real world, Rico Lewis, a genuine wonder kid, went from £5,000 a week last season to £25,000 a week this season after playing a full year in the Premier and Champions League as part of Man City's first team squad. So I think it is reasonable to expect lower contract demands from high potential new gens until at least they've shown some real potential and featured in the first team over a fair period of time. That being said, I also think the contract demands for first team players needs toning down a bit too. Again, using City as an example, although this kind of extortion is not exclusive to them, I've had some players demand nearly 100% pay increase from an already massive salary, and I've had to comply, otherwise I risk a riot in the changing room. Edison, £300,000 a week. Rodri, £300,000 a week. Bernardo Silva, £425,000 a week. Yes, Manchester City have the cash, but those sort of numbers are reserved for the top 1% of world-class footballers like Haaland, like Kevin De Bruyne. The sort of players a club would regard as jewels in the crown. Now, my second bugbear is player fatigue. It's been in the game for many, many years and in my opinion needs toning down. Admittedly, but not by much. I understand that football is intense, it's physical, But it is a little bit far-fetched to have half my first team jaded and in need of a rest by October. They are pro athletes after all. On top of that, goalkeeper injuries are an issue. Using Edison as an example, he damaged his knee in early March and was out for the rest of the season. This annoyingly was after he signed his new £300,000 a week contract. And despite the game's best efforts to make me cry after breaking him, I did manage to retain the Champions League with Ortega in goal. So yeah, that was quite nice. Now fortunately, this bug, along with many others, has been recognised by Sports Interactive and it will be patched out soon. By the time this video goes live, it may have already been ironed out. Game director Miles Jacobson recently released a post on the official game forum acknowledging some of the game's issues at launch and has reassured players that fixes are on the way. AI management and squad building, although not terrible, is currently subpar. There has been some problems with newly licensed J-League and the Argentinian leagues, incorrect rules, players missing, that sort of thing. Link to that post in the description below for all those that would like to have a read. Now I appreciate most of the points made in this video are quite negative, but, and it is a big but, I have enjoyed my time with the game. It might not be immediately apparent, I admit. With close to 50 hours currently logged, I fully intend to add an extra couple of hundred onto that total in the coming weeks and months. You'll always get value for money with FM, and that Football Manager magic that draws its player base back time and time again is still there. Despite its flaws, I recommend the game, but maybe hold off until it's received its first big patch, which won't be far away. Or if you've got willpower, unlike me, you might want to wait for next year's release, when hopefully we will see some genuine overhauls. The fact still remains that you can lose entire days to this game once you get your teeth into it. People say goodbye to their social lives, company sick days increase, marriages break down as spouses across the globe file for divorce because their partners prefer the company of South American teenagers. And if a game can have that kind of hold over people, then it must be doing something right. Anyway, I suppose you always hurt the ones you love, and I do still love you, Football Manager, after all these years, even if sometimes you don't love me back. As I've previously already said, the magic is still there, but unfortunately FM24 lacks match practice. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe if you'd be so kind, and until next time, doodle pip.